Good morning, ma'am. Myself Chandrika. I'm from ECA section. Today's my topic is the ties of peace. Contents: introduction of author, summary of the story, characters, themes, and analysis. Conclusion, references. Introduction of author. The document summarizes Saki's short story, The Ties of Peace. It discusses how to Eleanor shows her brother an announcement about a tie design competition to promote peace. While Eleanor believes this can influence children positively, her brother is skeptical that it can change human intents like aggression. Brief summary of the story. The Ties of Peace is a short story by Saki H. Munro. Now, for his sharp wit and satirical take on society, the story follows Harvey Bob, who, influenced by progressive ideas, decides to replace his nephew's traditional war-themed ties with educational and peaceful alternatives. Models of civic buildings, historical figures like John Howard, and representations of parliamentary life. However, his well intentioned plan backfires spectacularly. The children, unimpressed by the peaceful ties, creatively repurpose them to enact their own battles and violent scenes. The story humorously highlights the difficulty of steering children's naturally tendencies away from the excitement. Characters. Ties of Peace is a short story by Saki H. Munro. Now, for his satirical wit, the main characters included Harvey Bob, a well-meaning uncle who wants to introduce peaceful to his nephew and niece, Eric and Bertie, his young nephew and niece, who have their own ideas about how to play with their toys. Eleanor Bob, Harvey's sister, who supports his vision of non-violent ties. Themes and analysis. Themes: the futility of idealism. Harvey's attempt to instill peaceful values through ties ultimately fails, suggesting that human nature is drawn to violence and conflict. Efforts to encourage pacifism. Satire on society and upbringing. Saki Certifies the unrealistic expectations placed on children to accept moralistic ideas instead of embracing their natural distincts. Childhood imagination versus adult intervention. The boys instinctively reshape their ties to fit their understanding of the world, showing that imposed ideas can't override innate tendencies. Analysis. Saki's irony shines in how children's imagination subverts adult attempt to dictate morality. The absurdity of introducing peaceful ties, figure like John Stuart Mill and Sir John Herschel. Conclusion. The Ties of Peace by Saki H. Munro ends with a humorous yet ironic conclusion. The story revolves around a well-meaning attempt by Harvey Bob to provide his nephews with educational and non-violent ties, hoping to steer them away from the traditional war them playing things instead of tie soldiers and battle scenes. He introduced figureness and historical reformers, model farmhouse, and peaceful civic structures. However, despite his efforts, the boys quickly repurposed the ties into violent scenarios, showing that their natural inclination of dramatic and combative play remains unchanged. In the end, his hopeful experiment fails, illustrating the futility of trying to enforce peaceful play on children whose imaginations are drawn to action and conflict. Saki, with his characteristic wit, pokes fun to idealist social reforms, suggesting that human nature, especially in children, is not too so easily modeled by external influences. The conclusion leaves readers amused but also reflective on the deeper theme of how ingrained. Reference: The Ties of Peace is a short story by Saki Hector Hug Munro, first published in 1991. It humorously satirizes the idea of replacing violent ties with peaceful alternatives to encourage non-aggressive behavior in children. The story flows as well-meaning uncle who gifted his nephew civilian themed toys instead of soldiers, only for them to creatively interpret them in a way that still involves conflict. Thank you, ma'am.